Okay, I'll go ahead and call a meeting to order. This is a special meeting for the Hoosier Lake Library Board of Trustees for the municipal library. So I'll start off by taking a roll. Bob Scottum. Here. Kim Gerard.
Here.
Shauna Dean.
Here.
Teresa DePauw-Hunt.
Here.
And Jan.
Here.
All right, all present. Did they have their mics on? Okay, so not much to review, but I'll still ask for a motion to approve the agenda or any additions, corrections before we move on.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of the agenda?
Aye.
Okay, we're good to go. All right, so I'll start off by saying that, welcoming everyone and saying that, this meeting has been called, in response to, Council Member Kurtz's, request for a collaborative effort, to, review and discuss the, current, ordinance that has been proposed, at the city council by the legislative body. So in that spirit, we have called this meeting for that collaborative event. All right, before we go any further though, I'll call for any citizens' comments at this time. Sandy?
First up, I have, Petra Hoy. If I have anyone on Zoom that would like to make a comment, please send me a message in chat and I will call your name when it's your turn.
So let me make a couple comments before we start. I'd like to remind everyone to please tell us your name and if you are a citizen of the city. And then unfortunately, we do not have the clock for you to be able to view while you're talking. So Jandy will be keeping that time. I'll ask her to give you a heads up when you have a minute left and then count down from there. So you have an idea where you're at. Okay, you're on. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Petra Hoy, PD, and I live in the county. So I don't live in the city, but I do have a library card. And I just really wanted to thank you all for all your work. And we really appreciate you, and we see you, and we know it's been really hard. And especially to Jandy, you have been such a class act and just epic integrity, and it just makes me want to cry. Just so impressed with you and really appreciate you. So got you a little something. So these are some of my favorite books, which also so happen to be banned books. But when you really start looking at the list, almost everything, any book can be on the banned book list. But again, we love you and we appreciate you, and just please keep up the good work. We really need you in the fight. Thanks.
Thank you. And I would agree with your statement about our library director. She is a fantastic young woman. All right, do we have anyone else? Jen, do we have anybody on Zoom?
Hold on, I'm just letting a few people into the meeting.
Into the chat room, okay.
If we have anyone on Zoom that would like to make a comment, please send me a message in chat and we will, call your name. Okay, I think we're good to go.
All right, so at this time, we'll turn this the floor over to Councilmember Kurtz and continue from there. Thank you, Councilmember.
I just want to thank everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to attend today and for the special meeting. So at the last city council meeting, one of the things that I asked for was for ordinance 119B to go to committee so that we could have that collaborative discussion with the board of trustees that was the recommendation of the mayor. And so unfortunately, that offer was not taken up by the council, but I guess the spirit that I have is to continue to try to do things and be collaborative anyway. I think you guys all know that I'm a broken record with community engagement, and I think that this fits in with that. And sometimes if you're not invited to the table, you bring up your own chairs, and I feel like that's where we are today. So I feel like if we could boil everything down to the root problem, and how we got here without spending a lot of time on that. I feel like the things that I've heard from the board of trustees, the council, and the citizens are that there was a lack of trust, a lack of meaningful communication, and a focus on power. So for today, in order to be solutions focused, I'd like to just set aside whether the council can or should control the policies of the library, because at this point, they do have the authority and the votes to do so. So part of the reason why I reached out to one of the board of trustees members to continue this dialogue or to start this dialogue with you instead of about you was to come to the middle. That was the discussion that we had on the record at several different points in several different meetings. And so at this point, what I feel like has happened is the council has put forward their best and final offer. This is the best and final offer that they're willing to consider. It's more simple than it has been in the past with regard to the ordinance. And so I ask you guys, what is your best and final offer? What do you feel, what can we come to today, or what can you come to today? Because ultimately the decision is up to you as to whether there's something you want to put forward, or there's something, or there's nothing. That could be a possibility too. But what language could you potentially put forward that would address the concern that you have? What I feel like I've heard, and whether people agree with me or not, that the number one issue that the citizens and what I feel like this board has brought forward is the number one issue is a concern about censorship and restricting access in the library. If I'm wrong about that, you guys can discuss and figure out what you guys want to talk about today. But I feel like the language that's been proposed and that you guys have in your handouts today, and I think Jan will put on the screen, is a choice. There's two options that are listed there, or there's something different that you guys come up with on your own. Or there's nothing. Maybe what is out there and what's proposed is not something you guys would feel like would meet your needs or the needs of the community. But I still stand ready if there's something else that is not up there today that you guys are wanting to talk about or work through, willing to work through that until and through next week. I just want to make sure that based on what I've said before, that there is transparency, that something, whatever you guys come up with, would be presented to the council in advance of the council meeting so that they could have some time to review it, kind of chew on it a little bit. I don't want to have surprises. I didn't appreciate being surprised. That's kind of why I again wanted to work with the board of trustees and hoping that whatever you guys do or don't come up with, there's some time for the community to weigh in on that between now and the next council meeting so that we can hear that as well. So, does any questions before I sit on them?
I have a question. Am I incorrect in stating that this Tuesday is the second read? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if it is a second read, that means it is up for a vote, correct? If everybody agrees to the second read language, or if not.
Yes, I mean, it is a second read. I think that, it is a second read, it'll be up for a vote, yes.
Okay. I appreciate your effort, I really do, but I'm trying to, in my mind, I'm trying to resolve, if the language is already there and it's a second read ordinance, where is the room to discuss your options? I would like, that's what I'm kind of struggling with. So if you could help me out with that, that would be helpful.
So amendments can come before the council at a second read on an ordinance, and the adjustments can be made to that. I think our attorney has said it's not the ideal way to do things, but I guess in this shortened time frame that we've been presented with, that would be the option. I think people could ask for a special meeting. I think there's a lot of different ways to move that out just a tiny bit, so that I don't think that there's a lot of appetite to move it out past December. But there can be a motion on the record at that meeting. And if there was something that you guys agreed with, wanted to put in there, I would do the work with the city to actually get that put into the format of the ordinance so that people can see it and what it would look like at that meeting to approve or reject.
Questions, Shauna?
Yeah, I want to thank you for being transparent and being, taking the community into consideration in the library ordinance, proposals that others on the council have not done. My understanding is you would propose this as an amendment during the second read, and whether it goes through or not is up to a vote. I think that in the 119D, what had made it into the ordinance on 119C was that the council would not ban books. And that did not get put into 119D, and that was the largest concern of the community. The council members that have voted for the change in the ordinance have repeatedly said it's not about banning books. But Jed made some comments at the last council meeting that leads me to believe it's about making sure those books don't get in the library in the first place, which is banning books. I'm for having language in the ordinance that books will be banned or censored or access restricted. It is just a good reminder, and it, I think, helps allay the fears of the community that that is the intent and that that is what's going to happen when this ordinance change goes into effect. The fact that we have to potentially put in that that the council won't break any laws, which is one of the proposed languages here, is interesting. The fact that we feel that that might need to be said out loud, that no laws will be broken. But it seems to me that from the intent and the comments of the last council meeting, something like this maybe, I think it's a good idea to put it in there to show the community that that's really not what they need to be doing, or to have council members say that, no, they're not going to put that in there. I think it says something either way, if they're going to vote for or against adding in that they won't ban or restrict or censor.
Well, could I ask for some comments okay, go ahead, Teresa, you can comment, but I wanted to ask for comments about these particular proposals of any, so I wanted to ask, is that what you were gonna comment on? Okay, so I was gonna ask, if we could discuss one or two option and decide if there's one of those that we prefer, since, there needs to be some language in there, to address some of these concerns. So, if you guys could take a look at that, and we could discuss that and see if either one of those two proposals are one that we prefer to have in the current or the proposed ordinance.
I have a question. Okay,
Go ahead.
so, if we go, I'm reading through these, number one, version one, the verbiage is very concise and specific. My question though is, if council does propose that they review or deny a library policy that we've already reviewed, for example, the collection policy, which is pertinent to why we're all here. My question is, does then go back to the board to work with the lawyer to determine if the approval or denial or verbiage that they're wanting to add into the collection policy is then applicable to local, state, federal law? Who does the work behind that?
Good question. I think that it's silent at the moment on what happens if the council doesn't approve them. And I don't know if that means you guys need to draft procedures for what happens in that way, or not. But that would probably be a good question for Sean to make sure that, he knows, because I assume that it sounded like he was consulted on the language, that they put in there. So he might have a better answer to that.
Yeah, it would be interesting because if based on what the current 119D, and the verbiage is simply to approve or deny library policies, there's nothing in there that states how often does it go back and forth? Do we have to change verbiage suggested by council that's voted on unanimously or just based on majority? I mean, we can nickel and dime our 19 policies with the council for, you know, the 18 months that we've been working on this. So I'm just curious what the thought process is behind that.
Yeah, and I didn't propose that language, so.
Yeah.
Kim,
Well, it just seems to me that when this ordinance passes, that we don't make policy anymore. We make suggestions and then we don't approve or deny the changes that we've made. We send that to the city council for them. So we wouldn't be making up the rules about how far, we don't make any rules, we don't make any policies, we just advise. And so we're just here to advise.
Yeah, and my question for that
I
would
could
be,
go back and forth
yeah, yeah,
until.
Is there
we get
a
that message
limitation of
through
how
the Stockton
often-
Board of Trustees
yeah.
and pick people who will agree with them.
I had assumed we would still draft a policy. Like, for example, the personnel manual is something that the council approves, and the HR will draft the whole personnel manual, and then council goes in and approves it or gives it suggestions.
So we'll just be giving suggestions to the city council about library policies.
Yeah, but I assumed we would still draft it,
Right,
draft our proposal. We wouldn't just be like, hey, I think it needs these 3 things.
so then
I
once,
had assumed we would still draft a policy.
we would draft our policy and we would present it to the council. And the council would vote to approve. That's all there is. And if they voted to not approve, then I would assume, and this might not be a correct assumption, but I would assume they would also provide with that rejection of the policy, a list of their concerns and their research, key word here, as to why that policy change needs to happen, whatever policy change they are asking for.
but that didn't matter with the collection development policy, we did get guidance on what to put in that policy.
Well, I get that, but I'm talking about future. I'm talking about with the current written form of the policy.
And we got guidance from the city lawyer,
We did,
not specific
and
council members.
and yet here we are.
Yeah, Bob, do you have a comment or would like to ask Andy some questions?
And the comment I had was, it does put the burden on the Board of Trustees in the revised ordinance to adopt or revise the policies. So by adopting or revising policies, we would have to, you know, by default, we would have to approve that as a board. Because we couldn't, you know, change the policy or make a revision without the board voting to do that. So we do have, you know, we're required to do that, then we have to present it to them the way I've read the proposed ordinance. We would have to present it to them in either one of those quarterly reports and or a special report asking for approval.
As we always have, but we have never asked for approval. We've just presented to them our policies and how we revise our policies going forward. Because that's the nature of what we've been asked to do. And so that would change. We would still do all the work of developing the policy. We present the policy to the council. The council reviews the policy, in my mind, according to the way it's written now, the ordinance. And they would say, no, they ask for a vote, and if the vote says they don't like it, then it has to come back for review. Now, that's where I think the current wording in their current ordinance is lacking. And we said this before, and we've had this discussion before, we had it all the way along. If that's the way they wanna go, then there has to be a procedure for dealing with any approval or denial of a policy, and there's no procedure there. So, in my mind, that creates a problem.
Especially if you take into account that we meet once a month. So if we present, and we only give report quarterly. So if we're presenting a quarterly report saying, here are the proposed, policies, and then they deny it, and then we wait a month, and then we get back together and we say, okay, well, let's make the changes, and then we present it next quarter, like that's where I'm so confused about, because
Well,
it wastes city resources.
But there's nothing in that, that's where the gray area, I mean, that's where it's gray and we don't have any direction. But what I would like to ask of the board members here is, can we focus on one of the languages that, that has been proposed by, Councilman Kurtz? And then, discuss that, going forward. I'll just share my opinion and on these two things, and then we can go around and talk about it. I prefer number one, that's my preference. And because it kind of covers that the library policy that implicitly or explicitly allows or authorizes censorship, nor any library policy that may infringe upon rights and liberties afforded to individuals, and it includes applicable local, state, and federal laws. So, the council, if this would be put in there, then they would be bound, to be very cautious about anything that would, be a vote to, or even to allow us to censor something. It goes both ways. So, that's why I'm okay with that one.
Yeah,
If we have to have if we have to have the authority taken away from us to make these very important decisions about the collection that's in our library and for our public, I think that's an important thing to be added or amended to the current wording.
With that one, with both of them in particular, so I'm sorry that I don't have the ordinance in front of me, but I feel like it's, in the board of trustees roles and responsibilities, there's that piece that says, right now it says that the revision of the policies will be subject to 2E of whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it would say the board of trustees and the council, which I think one of the discussions that was had along the way too was, by Mayor Pro Tem Boyer, was what if you get kind of a board that wants to censor things, right? So that would also be, it would be on both sides, to not, move forward towards censorship. So just wanted to put that clarification out there. There'd be like another piece that makes it for everybody.
yeah, I like one also because when it deals with the implicit and explicit censorship, but it also, it gives it covers the instance that you both brought up of if there is a board of trustees in the future that does want to censor, and so they change policies so that they can censor or restrict access or ban books, the city council can say, no, we can't, that we're not gonna approve that policy. We can't approve that policy. So I think it covers the instance where they had brought up, well, what if the board of trustees starts to ban? So I like one.
Bob, you want?
Either one of them says essentially the same thing. But, I could see some, people having questions about, do you want a negative or do you want a positive? The shall not versus shall. And so I think that needs to, be part of the thought process. I think you could still cover, it if, people said they didn't want the negative. You could still put in there that explicitly or implicitly that language, because then you're approaching it, everything else in the ordinance says what you are supposed to do, or what the board is supposed to do, what the council is supposed to do. So Samantha kind of person in me says we should keep it in the, we shall do this, but not, explicitly, or implicitly authorize censorship. The other thing that you brought up, Shauna, and this is something that as this potential amendment is written, does not, as you said, Councilmember Kurtz, doesn't specifically call out the board of trustees. So it's possible that, either we have to add language there that says the mayor, the council, or the board of trustees, or and the board of trustees, or if you go that route, and technically, you could almost say the city. I mean, because the employee, in other words, the city of Liberty Lake will not suggest policy. That covers the mayor, the council, the employees, the library director, any of the commissions, whether it's engaged with, board of trustees. I don't know if we want to go that far, but I think the alternative is to include the board of trustees in that language as well. That shows we're willing to address that other issue, because that created, in my recollection, that created a lot of heated discussion back and forth about, who's rogue and who's not rogue.
Yeah, and I think the intent would definitely be to have it in both spots, the duties of the mayor and the council and the duties of the board of trustees. So referencing back to the change of policies, in the approval process, but making sure that if it isn't already clear in, what we have drafted, to put that in there.
Right. I think you're right. It has to be all in one, or it has to be in the two separate spots, but, I could go with either language. I lean towards the, being the positive, we shall, or versus shall not. It's like a restriction. That's my thought.
Okay, thank you. Kim?
I was also leaning toward number one, but had wrestled with that language of shall or shall not. But I ended up landing on number one because of the implicit and explicit.
Yes.
So if we could somehow include that in number two, that would keep us on the path of what we shall do. So I don't know if we want to wordsmith something different that would include that, or if we just want to vote on number one and it's fine.
I'm not sure we need to give council member her some direction going forward, so we need to come up with something, some sort of any language correction that she might agree with. Just to have her take to the council on Tuesday night. If we wanna add that, if we wanna kind of do some word working, before we.
There is one instance of a shall not, and it shall not make any expenditures or incur indebtedness. So it wouldn't be outside, but you're correct. Everything else is a positive. You shall do this versus a you shall not.
Well, I'm thinking about this, if we include the board, so the mayor or the city council or board shall not propose, I feel like that creates an inclusive verbiage that encompasses all of us, not just, and in that way, it also allows for a more collaborative approach to this amendment. So it's not looking as, oh, we're trying to guide council, in a certain direction when it comes to their ordinance. But it includes us as well, so it's showing, hey, there's a collaboration. Like we all acknowledge that anybody, board or council, could potentially, be an issue when it comes to the Freedom to Read Act and the Library Bill of Rights and the First Amendment. So, I think including that shows our good faith effort that, we want it to be approachable to the whole city, or applicable to the whole city.
So do we want to suggest some wording changes and then,
My suggestion is just to add in the library board to the mayor and the council and leave shall not in there. That's my suggestion.
all right, so if we worked on it, have you got a kind of an idea?
Or we can do the city or. the
Oh,
mayor.
and yeah, encompass there.
Because, and the ordinance does state in there, the city, in many instances.
The reason
I'm assuming the city would encompass board.
The city and all of this.
Mayor, all of- yeah.
Yes.
So the reason I'm suggesting to add specifically the title of the board is because the council members who have continuously brought forth ordinance changes specifically have noted that they want accountability of the board. And so by adding in the board, I feel like that gives.
Yeah,
Makes that
I would
crystal
agree
clear.
with
Yeah,
that.
it makes that
I agree with
crystal
that.
clear. Like, because I think if you say the city, then there's gonna be a lot of back and forth about, well,
So,
I think it needs to be explicitly stated for some council members.
so the city council, mayor, or library board of trustees, or we put it, or it's suggested to put in both sections, one saying city mayor and one lower saying board of trustees. Either way, I think it's fine. You can turn it to say shall only propose or approve changes to library policies that do not, it's a shall, but then a do not implicitly or explicitly. keep
So
around.
change out not to only. So the
Yeah.
mayor or council or board shall only propose or approve
Any
library, and there's
policy
no any, but library policy that implicitly or explicitly.
That
That
does
does
not.
That does not,
Implicitly, because we have to put the not somewhere.
yeah, somewhere it has to.
Do not, and but.
I was gonna,
Not-
as I read that, I'm thinking, there's something wrong there. So,
There's gotta be a negative in there somewhere.
Yeah, so instead of a shall not, but they shall only approve things that don't. Then, I think that kind of complicates it more, but,
Yeah.
then you've got a positive and a negative rather than just a negative, but I don't know how
Well-
else to write it.
I can live with the
I
not,
was okay with not.
going down the positive.
Not is, I mean, it just says the mayor, I think if you want it, you just add the board of trustees to that first one and leave it alone. That's my opinion, but
I think trying to make it a shall instead of a shall not makes it
yeah,
cumbersome.
I agree.
So I think that having it in the first section and the second, that, well, I can give you the exact, but you know what sections we're talking about. Section 2, which is the authority of city council and mayor, and then section 6, which is board of trustees. So that you have the city council and mayor in the section 2, and then you have the board of trustees shall not in section 6. Covers both instances that protecting against a board that wants to be in, and also a city council or mayor that wants to be in.
So you're suggesting, if I'm just trying to figure where, you're suggesting that the first mention is the mayor and the city council shall not, and then when we get down to the section about the trustees, the library board of trustees shall not, so you.
Yeah, because
Because of the way
there's
they
not
set the
one section
responsibility.
that,
right.
yeah, exactly,
Got it.
because the headings are the library, the mayor,
Unless it becomes just a
section 9.
whereas.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the definitions, you know, because we always define what is what. I mean, the other option is just put the combined one in the beginning, whereas, you know, the mayor, the city council, or the library board of trustees. I don't know if you can do that. That's more of a legal question for Sean.
Generally, yeah, and generally that whereas is an explanation of how you got where you are versus a this is what you shall not do.
I'm good with being in two places.
Okay, so I want to make sure we're clear on what we're suggesting, to Ms. Kurtz. So, good. Okay, so I'm gonna try to read what I think we've got. So there's two sections to the policy that we're talking about, the ordinance, right, that we're talking about. And the first section, we're suggesting that we agree to number 1, correct?
Yes,
And in the second section, so number 2, the wording, we're not going on with that one at all, okay? So in the second section of the ordinance that delineates, board of trust,
board of trustees
Yeah.
responsibilities.
we want to specifically put board of trustees in there, right? Okay, board of trustees, and I think it says refer back to 2E, doesn't it? I don't know the exact wording, I don't have it in front of me, but we want to make sure we have board of trustees in there.
Right, that's section 6G,
6G, thank you, Bob.
and the other one is section 2.
2,
It would be another,
this is 2E, that,
2E is the approval of policies, but it'd be somewhere within section 2, you would add that, you know, paragraph number 1. And then in section 6G, you would add a version of paragraph 1 that calls out the board of trustees instead of the mayor and the council.
Got it. Good, now I'm clear. Did you get all that, Hanny?
I'm clear, yeah.
Okay, good, all right. Want to make sure you had it. Okay. Do you have any other questions or comments for us?
I think my biggest thing that I wanted to walk away with was something that you guys, as many of you support as we can get, you feel like it meets, what the public is worried about and what you've been worried about. So if you feel like number 2, as you've outlined in those spaces in the ordinance, would make you feel comfortable going forward with this ordinance, then I'm happy to bring that motion forward.
I
That's
mean,
my
number
biggest-
1.
Yes,
Yes.
number 1.
Said number 2, I was like, no. Okay,
Number
so,
1,
okay.
next section.
Yes.
I know number 1, yeah.
Yeah.
But just making sure that it is something that, it sounds like there's unanimous agreement on that. Because I don't want to go forward with anything with 3 of you going, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. I don't think it's in the best interest. So,
Do we want to, I'm happy to propose a vote. This is our recommendation based on.
If you want to make a motion that we'll
Yeah.
call for a vote.
Yeah, I so move that the language in, 1 be proposed to add to section 2, and that language amended to add library board of trustees to be added to section 6 of the ordinance, as approved by the library board of trustees, to. I guess that's.
Do I have a second on, have a second? I'll take a vote by show of hands this time. Okay, all in favor? Okay. 5-0. We're good. Okay, so Annie, I want to thank you very much for stepping forward and being transparent. This certainly was a surprise. I was out of town. I get a phone call. I'm going, what? So I want to really thank you for being open and transparent and coming up with something that we hopefully will be an amendment that the rest of your colleagues on the council will agree to and move forward with. Any closing comments by anyone?
Yeah, I have a question, Councilmember Kurt. I have not read all of the ordinances establishing the other committees, but I'm wondering if it's in section 2, paragraph F, the appointing a city council member to attend board of trustees meetings as an observer, if that's in any other that you can recall of the establishing ordinances, because it seems like, it seems like double counting, if you will, because we already have to report and we have to publish when the meetings are, and anybody can attend, like several of the council members are attending this meeting. I don't know if that's a double counting, if you will, do we need that in there or not, but I don't want to drag out the process, having dragged it out this far.
So I don't recall that it is in any of the policies, but, to be honest, I haven't read all of them recently to know where I can look specifically for that. I don't know, Mark, if you know offhand.
I would have to review to confirm, but typically you would not put that language into an ordinance.
Any other comments? Teresa?
Yeah, I was just having a question, and I was gonna see, at the next meeting, if there's discussion before or after the second meeting. I just wanted some guidance for us as advisory, in regards to First Amendment library policies. If, with our new statement, if specific council members want to look at the book collection policy again, because they've made statements that they don't agree with it, and we give advice saying, well, here are the specific laws that govern that specific policy, where does it go from there? Does Sean the lawyer get involved?
I think where it goes from there is a big question that I don't particularly have an answer for, other than reviewing the policies is not an action that's being taken that you could then, that's in violation of the policies, but taking an action that is not in line with this would be something that somebody else would need to take
So,
forward.
like suggesting a specific change to the collection policy, that then.
Or voting on
prohibits
something, like an
that.
action, yeah, but I'm not a lawyer either, so, that would be something to check in with probably Sean about, just to make sure you understood what was, what they potentially could or couldn't do, what you should be paying attention to if it's passed.
John?
I have talked to some lawyers, First Amendment lawyers around if the city council does want to change policy to restrict access. And, there are a number of lawyers that would be happy to take on a case if the city council decides that they want to restrict access or ban drugs by policy.
Bob, any closing comments?
No, I just had that question.
Okay, Kim?
I just want to say that I am really looking forward to putting this behind us. And our library has a bright future, it is a shining star in this community. And we are moving forward, and talks of cutting budgets, and that's not okay. Our library is growing. Our library has great attendance. It's been documented by consultants that we are an important part of this community, in that report that I read before I became a board member. And so I am looking forward to the time where we can just focus on our bright future and not have to wrangle with this. The library is a refuge for all people. And a lot of us sitting around this table at different times, we don't have a window into the lives of other people. We don't know how important the library is as a refuge for people who don't feel comfortable in our society. As a child, I went to the library when I needed space, and we need to continue to offer that to people in our community.
So, Teresa, I don't see anything in the policy, in the new, ordinance that says there's no retroactive thing, and they have to come back and ask about,
Previously.
other, policy that's already established. I think that this, as I read it, I might be wrong, as I read it, it says that any policy going forward that we put develop would have to be approved by the council. That's the way I see it.
Any approved or revised, it's.
Right, and they said in the meeting last week, that, that language retroactively, that was taken out.
So I'm just gonna finish by saying it's unfortunate that we're here, again. And, I would hope that that this could have waited until all elected council members were seated before this was brought up again. But that's not the case. So that's why we're here. And I do appreciate again, Annie, that you are working with us to try to come up with something that we can all live with going forward. And I appreciate that very much. Any other comments? Any citizen comments? Jandy, do we have any?
Oh, we don't have citizen comment at the end, only.
I know we don't, but I'm asking for them anyway.
If anyone would like to make a comment, you can fill out a paper or send me a message in chat.
Thanks.
Okay, it looks like we're good. All right, thank you for attending, and thank you again, Annie. Okay, thanks, bye. We're done.
That's fine.